All right. Well, today we're going to be talking about digital storytelling in action, how you and your students and your school can use social media to drive results and to tell stories and share information about what goes on at your school. So, why this webinar? Why in October? Why let school start and talk about it now? Well, I've had enough time now to talk to quite a few of our schools and just kind of listen into, hey, you should be, I kind of suggest, hey, you should share this on social, and they just kind of there's been some hesitancies from some people, and so I think what I boiled it down to after listening to some feedback is that the primary reason for not doing it is lack of structure or training, right? Uh, we don't know how to accurately, we're not PR managers. We don't know how to say things appropriately or whatever. Like, and sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, you might just be saying that because you don't want to do it, because you post all the time on your personal social media, and so it's like you know how to post, and your students know how to do it too because they're actively doing it. You're just like, well, I don't know how to post, school related information online in a safe way. And that's valid. The second thing is just inconsistent content planning. You might be a teacher and a school that's got a great program, and you're like, okay, we know how to make videos, we know how to make graphics, we know how to do a text post on X about stuff, but you just don't know how to assign a student to it, how much time it's going to take, when you should do it, why you should do it, all of those things that come with planning out content. Uh, and the third, and I said the first one might be the biggest, but the third honestly might be one of the bigger issues at a school is teachers and administrators fearing losing control over their social media accounts because students are creating the content. Now, as a former student myself, not too long removed from creating digital media content in high schools, I get all three of those fears, right? All three of those problems, those struggles. I was able to see them from one side, the student side. And then as I've worked at this job now for 3.5 years, I've gotten to see these problems from the other side, not the student side, but the teacher and the admin side. And I think there's a little room to wiggle on everyone's fear of control. So if you feel like the teacher, and that's Rob Goff, and I don't think he fears losing control, but if you feel like you're constantly looking over the shoulders of your kids while they're doing their projects, making sure that they're doing it right, there are some very simple systems that you can put into place to help relieve the anxiety of like, okay, is a student going to mess up, right? If we do the right training, we set the right ground rules, we make the systems, that's not going to be a problem. So I mentioned me, and so I'm going to take hopefully only about 5 minutes to talk about me, because I am a storyteller, right? I tell stories. It's what I do. Um, it, yes, a lot of it is broadcasting. So I was telling stories for my school, Sutton High School, as a broadcaster on a live stream. I was telling the story of the athlete and the team and the school, and I was doing it with somebody else. And so we had a little bit of back and forth banter, but I was telling the story. I was also though doing it through graphics and videos and some getting closer towards journalistic ways of reporting what was going on at school. I was in a digital media class, and there were 26 kids in my graduating class. Each kid got about a 2.5 minute video interview where we asked the same 8 or 9 questions to the kid to my classmates, and they were all video, green screened, and posted on our school's YouTube channel. How did I get the green light for that? I don't know, because watching them back, I'm like, I older me would make some different editorial decisions on some of the content that we left in, and even the blooper reel, that one probably should have stayed private, but that's okay. You learn as a student, and no harm done. But I also, like I said, tell stories through video. And again, a big part of me is video and video storytelling. So all of these aspects, graphics, broadcast, photos, uh, blog posts. If your school website has a spot for that, and you have students that want to do it, if you have a school newspaper, journalism class, like all of these places, students can be plugged in to be promoting your school in the right way, right? And so I've been there, I've done it. Part of me being there and doing it is also coming up with rules, personal rules for me. And I think that as I've, you know, thought over in my mind about the rules for creating content, they apply very, very well to a classroom setting, right? Yes, there are days that we can create content just for fun, um, but I like to look at it in a different way, right? So rule number one for me is it must be educational. Rule number two, it must tell a story. And rule number three, it must help people. Now, these are not ands, these are and ors, right? These are not all of these must be true, but at least one of these has to be true when I decide to take on a creative project, when I decide to work on anything. You know, they're my three guiding principles in life: is it helping someone, is it helping tell a story, or is it educating somebody on something, right? And they're all very closely intertwined. And so, as you can see, the screenshot on the screen right now is a video that I made helping my local community home, senior living place, do a video to raise funds for a new building. Um, what of which of these rules were matched as I decided to take on the project? Is it educational? Well, I got to tell the story of what happened in the home, and people that might not understand what happens in a community home learn something new. Um, does it tell a story? I told the story of, hey, these residents are really well taken care of, but the facilities are failing. Okay, match number two. And will it help people? Well, in the long term, if the video does what it's supposed to do, which is help kickstart fundraising for a new building, not only have I helped the people in charge of the fundraising event, but I've also helped the people in the home who are going to benefit from new and improved living spaces. So check, check, check for all three. This is an external example, though, that can be applied to your school. Are you highlighting things that most people don't get to see? That's the stories that you need to be looking for. And so that is why I have these rules for creating content, and why I think that they apply really well to school settings. Why storytelling matters, then? You might ask, why must we tell stories? Um, I love analytical statistics. And so this is a new chart. I've had some charts that I used in August. They're on the next slide. These are some new. This is a new graph. But the three biggest things are from this graph is that nearly half of U.S. teens say that they are online almost constantly. So these are the students in your classroom. About 75% of them say that social media is their most used source for news, for how they learn things. And the same 75%, it's a top news source, and the traditional media, i.e., newspapers, cable news, broadcast, are only relied on about 20%. Now, this isn't a diss at other forms of media. Everyone kind of has their own thing. Even people my age group will consume things differently. But the point of this is to say that your students are consuming stories on social media. And I believe that as long as you consume it, then you can identify it and you can recreate it. So your students are capable of telling stories because that's what they're constantly viewing on social media. And again, with the newspapers being lower, uh, we want, as people that are promoting our school, to hit on everybody. We want everyone to know what's going on. We want as many people to know as possible. And it's not just enough anymore to have the local newspaper come do an article about a person, let's say a student gets an award. It's not enough to just have the local newspaper come up and do it. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm glad that newspapers provide coverage for schools, but you as a school and teacher as part of the school can have a part in representing and sharing that out as well in a more instantaneous manner. Newspapers take time to print and get distributed. You can take a photo, type up a post, and hit send, and as soon as it says it's posted, everyone around the globe can see it as long as they have internet connection, which is awesome, right? So this is why storytelling matters. Again, I love these charts. It's just where people are spending their time and on what device, and social media scrolling. This is just to hammer the point home. Everyone is scrolling it, everyone's looking at it. And so if you don't have a presence still, it's 2025, almost 2026. And so you need to make sure you have a profile. And if you're not posting, start to develop some systems so that you can post and have a presence because everyone else does, right? And if you already have a presence, then incorporate your students because they know how to do it. They might need some guidance, and that's what you as the teacher are there for, but they know how to do it. So, here are the four things that I think students really need to understand about storytelling and using it with digital media. So, the first thing is they need to be able to identify story ideas that help amplify students' voice, the school's voice, and the school culture. If they can't identify newsworthy stories, um, I think about this like the story of the boy who cried wolf. Eventually, if you say that every event that happens is newsworthy, then nothing is newsworthy. If you watch, any news anymore, it feels like every time there's a new story, it's breaking news. And I always say, like, okay, doesn't that take away the point then of breaking news? Like, how are we going to know when something really, really big happens? That's what I always tell my parents. And so if you put down that every idea is, story worthy, even down to what did we have for lunch today? Well, that makes the other important things not so important. So being able to identify those stories, being able to guide strong interviews, and understand the structure of what makes a story. And we'll talk about that in a few slides. How they can use ethical, inclusive, I'd say fair storytelling techniques. So if you're reporting on something, does everyone who needs to, say something about it, are they being included? Or even when it comes to, hey, we're highlighting the football team a lot. Can we highlight a different sports, a different area of our sports teams? Like, let's not just focus on the big, a lot of people think the big ones are football, volleyball, basketball. It's like, hey, what about the girls golf team that, districts just happened? So the school that I graduated from, Sutton, made a post on social media because our girls golf team won districts. So they are fairly and accurately highlighting all of the programs. So that's important. And then I think it comes down to, can you use video, photography, audio, and graphics effectively? What are the right uses for each of them? What just needs to be a simple photo and some text on social media? What needs to maybe be a video? What needs to just be a graphic of like, hey, here's, it's something that you put together in Canva or something else like that. So we'll also talk about that. So how do we find the story, right? We walk around the halls of school and we hear a lot of things. And as teachers, with many different students rotating through your class, the amount of stories that you could hear in one day are a lot. And again, some of them are actually important to maybe share on social media. So I always look at this as like keeping the student voice at the center. And this goes both ways, not only for who's consuming the content, but for who's creating the content, right? So we want to focus on authenticity of the story and what stories are going to matter the most to the students. Your students in your class are going to take more of an initiative if they really, really care about the story that they're telling. Um, you're also going to have more students pay attention outside of the class to the news being reported when it matters to them. So let's go back to the lunchroom example. Maybe somebody doesn't care what they had for lunch today, but maybe there was a popular lunch item that they used to have that they no longer have. I could see somebody wanting to, write up a short little article and post about it because maybe that matters to people. If that's the way that, your school, your students think about things, then report on it. The other way to come up with ideas is really to let the students sit and brainstorm, right? We do this all the time for projects. Put them in groups, two to three, four students, and just sit there, whether it's a whiteboard or a piece of paper, a Google Doc, whatever, write down ideas of like, hey, I heard that this happened. Oh, I heard that this happened. There's a lot of things that, one student won't necessarily know everything that goes on in a school, but when you put a group of them together, they can, start to share different stories, and they'll start to be like, hey, this is maybe something that we could talk about. And again, like I said earlier, encourage variety beyond sports. And sports, I think, you're kind of the first nature thing that we want to do as schools, because almost every school's got sports, and it's an industry that we can see very visibly at the next levels, right? We can see how, we're in Nebraska, I am, so how the University of Nebraska Lincoln promotes their sports teams. They do interviews, they do videos, they do docu-series, they do score updates. We can see how they do that, and so we can replicate it in our classrooms. But my mom, who is was a fifth grade teacher, now down to fourth grade, she had this really cool project she'd do with her students called Christmas Around the World. It was an event that happened at school, and all the students would get together. They'd get, groups of two or three, and they would have to pick a country, make a traditional dish, and then right before Christmas break, they'd have a day where they'd celebrate all of the different countries that were selected by students and eat a bunch of good food. So, me as a high school student, I went down there for two reasons. One, I knew I could get some good food before lunch because the elementary ate before high school. And two, I could report on this. Hey, by the way, today was Christmas Around the World in Mrs. Ladehoff's fifth grade class, right? That's sharing something on social media that, unless you have a student who is a fifth grader, the outside population and people in the community might not know, right? So we're trying to share, I always say, break down the walls of the school, share a little bit more about what's happening on social media, and your students can do a great job telling that story. Or let's take the art fair, for example. Uh, how hard is it for a student to take their phone and to open up the camera app, and if they have, the Hollyland Lark M2 wireless microphone system, by the way, one of our favorite mics, they can clip it on a student, they can hold up their phone, and they can ask 1 to 2 questions about what that student made and is presenting. Could you not have 2 to 3 students go to the art fair, ask a few different people about their art piece, and post that on social media? I think that would be really cool. Do you have anybody planning to do anything for Christmas concerts coming up or things like that? Like, this is when I think about promoting schools and what happens at a school, my brain is always like, are you doing anything to highlight the arts? Are you doing anything to highlight the academics? Do you have new staff members this year? Is there any way that you could have a student get to interview them real quick to put on social media so that the people in town know, oh, hey, here's this new face, and here's their background? That's how we keep the school culture and the student voice at the center of the stories that we tell on social media. And again, I love local newspapers, and I love my local newspaper a lot, except it's a county-wide newspaper and it covers 3 high schools. And schools are not the only thing that it reports on, right? It has other news articles to publish in a newspaper. And so, as a school, I like seeing on social media, hey, this happened today, because the school and the digital media class and the journalism class can report on those things because they're there and they know what's going on. And the newspaper can't always get somebody up there to write a story on it. So I think it's really powerful to let the students tell the story of what's going on at their school and through their lens, because it's their learning experience. And so I think it's really powerful when we can couple all of these things together. Here's another example of picking and choosing stories and variety. This is a photo from Trey Perry's classroom at McCool Junction. He's an absolute rock star. We love working with him, and he's all in, right? Taylor said that before. Trey is all in with us. And this is their hoof print. So this is their school-led newspaper, a student-led newspaper. It actually gets printed out. It gets submitted. They win awards for the work that they do in this, for the articles that they write. Right? They submit them to win awards. And as you can see, they're doing it for the quarter number 1. And so on page 1, it's news. Page 2, it's they're jumping the second half of some of the stories from page one with some new stories. Page three is elementary happenings. Page four is activities. They've got a page for senior. I'm sure they're doing like highlighting seniors throughout the year. They have some op-ed pieces. I didn't ask Trey what F and F stood for, so gonna have to find that one out because that intrigues me. Although it looks like some games, maybe like spot the difference, word search, and where's Perry. So probably some games and entertainment type stuff. And then their eighth page is sports, right? And so you can see how they are, and they're not a large school by any means, uh, but just about every area is covered when we think about highlighting what's going on. And now they have to tell all these stories from what happened in the first quarter of the year. They used to do it monthly when they had a few more kids, but they're sacrificing quality, or they're sacrificing quantity for quality. And so they've had to get really selective with the articles that they write. And one of the questions, because I was in his class last week, that he asked, he was like, okay, if we write this article and the paper gets published, and this event happened a year and a half ago, or not a year and a half, but a month and a half ago, are that many, was it a big enough thing that people are going to remember it and want to still know more about it? And so they really have had to think about that as well, of like, okay, this might have happened with the third week of school, but now we're at the end of one quarter of the school year. So is it still pertinent to talk about? So that was just a super cool experience to be in that classroom and to get to see how their newspaper class put together stories and was using social media to tell some more immediate stories, and then using the hoof print to maybe go in a little bit more in depth with some well thought out written articles to highlight the school. So this slide I'm surprisingly passionate about teaching strong interviews. Um, I have had the opportunity to be interviewed and to interview others, whether it's for stories at the end of sports events or even for job applications, right? Like the interviews are just something that are a part of the human experience, as I'd like to call it, right? And so we want to teach our students how to be able to not only perform well in an interview, but to ask the right questions. So here's the way I always think about making sure you got all of your bases covered, right? The first part is just ask open ended questions. Don't ask something that is a yes or no answer. We want to know more. We want them to expand on something. And so I break it down to the five W's and the H: who, what, where, when, and why, and then how. Um, an example of why that's important to know. Let's say we have a student who, a volleyball player, broke a record for digs. Okay. How am I going to report this on social media? How am I going to tell the story? Well, first of all, we need to know who. So put the player's name. What happened? They broke a record. Fantastic. When did it happen? Happened the other night at the game. Fantastic. Why is this important for us to be reading the story at all? Well, it's only the third time that the record's been broken, or the record hasn't been broken since it was set in like 1980 or something like that. You can go into that detail. And then if it was a big and important deal, like how did it happen? Like, if it's maybe a different sport, if it's a basketball record, was it, the three-pointer that sent the game into overtime and also tied the record? Like that could be an interesting aspect of the story. So asking those open-ended questions and finding out the answers. And then listening actively. That is something, man, when I would do interviews, when I was in high school interviewing my classmates, or when I was in college and I had a class where I had to interview, I walked into one of those interviews so sure that the question I asked, I was going to get this exact answer. And boy, was I proved wrong. I will admit it right now. I learned a valuable life lesson. Don't assume anything, because I asked a question and the person gave me a completely different answer. And I was like, well, now all the rest of my questions are crap, because they're not going to follow the narrative that I was trying to tell. And so I learned very stop trying to force a narrative and let the people ask questions without your bias already in the question itself, so that you can get the answer from the person that is necessary and factual for them to give. So that's part of listening actively. And then make your students rotate through both sides. Like, have your students interview each other. It's a life skill like that they need to learn. This is beyond just telling stories, but every student, if they want a job, is going to have to go through an interview. Even me, I went through an interview with this job. Taylor, though, where did that happen to the subway? Is that correct? I mean, I was already an intern, but I feel like maybe we talked about it at Subway or something. So just being used to different situations of where you might be interviewed, and I've also worked for the city and had one in the boardroom with the mayor and the city administrator sitting very sternly across from me and saying, "You should have dressed up and looked a little bit more professional." Right? So it happens.
Yeah, you started your interview the day you walked in our office for your internship through school, so that was
Well,
the
there you
beginning,
go.
you didn't even know it.
I did not know. I was like, man, you were just like, hey, let's go get lunch. We went out to Subway and started asking me some questions. Like, okay, so this is when you said we're going to talk about it. This is how we're going to talk about it. We're not going to. I was like, you got an office here that I could, but no. I think I didn't eat as much of that sandwich as I thought I was going to, though. So I do feel bad about that. Anyway, very important skill, life skill for students to learn how to ask the right questions. I mean, I go into a whole thing, but lots of problems would be solved if people asked the right question and were able to articulate what they wanted, what they needed, and what they're asking for. So let's say you've got students who have come up with a lot of questions. What do you do to figure out what you should actually ask? This system was not created by me. It has been used by me a lot of times, and I find it very, very valuable. So hopefully you can see it, but I'll help explain the gist to you. So Danielle, who used to work on our team, was doing an interview with Dante Bullhauer, who is great at shooting video and also shooting photos. And it is actually both of these interviews are in our digital media education. So if you have access to that and you haven't watched them, you should. They're fantastic, deep dives with Dante. They're under 30 minutes each. And we set that specifically because we know that teachers are busy and might not have time for a whole hour long episode. And so when Danielle knew, like, hey, there's going to be a time crunch, I have so many questions. And Danielle was great at that. She had all kinds of questions. She loved asking questions. And so she was like, how do I know which ones to ask? I said, well, here's a system that I learned while I was in college. You go through first and you say, what are the most critical questions that I have to ask? Like, if I don't ask these questions, then we should just scrap the entire interview, right? Like, if this question doesn't get asked, we need to hit stop, restart, and shoot the interview completely over. Those you highlight in green. These are my must ask questions. So for Dante's photography, it was, what are the three must knows before getting behind a camera for the first time? Seems pretty important, especially if you're a student who's never shot photos. Uh, Going into a little bit of technical detail about what are your settings for different sports and why is that important? Again, must ask. If we didn't ask that question, then we should have just asked what it's like to, use a camera. But we're talking about sports photography. Some of the ones that would be nice to ask is, what do you think is the most important setting on your camera and why? Eh, It's a natural curiosity. I ask a lot of people, how they have their camera set up because I'm naturally curious. But to a student who's just starting out with photography, why do they care? Like, they just want to know how to use the camera, how to take decent enough photos. And so I was like, Danielle, let's make that a yellow. Let's say we would like to ask that, but if we don't get around to it, nothing hurt. Um, in your opinion, what takes a good photo to a great photo? Very subjective question. Like, to each their own kind of a way for what it makes a great photo. And so I was like, that one might be a little hard to answer. And in, within the time frame we have. So if the interview goes there, let's ask it. If not, no work, like nothing lost. One of the reds was what are the key what makes let's read the right one. Oh yeah. What are the key points to know when framing your photo? And I'm like, okay, that one again is very tough, especially for our intended audience. So knowing your intended audience helps. I was like, okay, that one's going to be a little tough for someone to answer in any reasonable time frame without doing a very deep dive and kind of needing more than just an interview and talking about it. You almost need to show them. I said, so that's going to be really tough in this example. So we did red. We're not going to ask that regardless of which direction the interview goes, right? So you can start to see, like, if you have students sit and get in a group and they come up with a bunch of questions, then the next step is for them to go through and say, all right, what are the questions that are absolutely critical to telling the story? What are the ones that would be nice for people to know? Maybe, and I always try to like ask one of the yellow questions in an interview because usually it's something like, oh, just a fun little thing to throw in on the side. And then the red ones, don't touch. I wouldn't necessarily delete them from the document, but just know that you're not asking those questions unless, you get to the interview and it's completely opposite of what you thought it was going to be. Again, this method was I was going through transcripts. I'd interview a person, and this was used mainly after the fact, but I love using it before the fact to weed through all of the questions because you can have a lot of questions to ask. It's like, what if we just kept it simple? And so Danielle asked in the one interview maybe 3 to 4 questions, which allowed Dante to go in depth on each question. And it made Danielle not feel rushed to be like, oh, I have so many questions to get to. It was like, no, let's just one question at a time. And if all we ask, I would love to try to do an interview where I literally just ask one question, one targeted question, and then the rest of the thing is just, off the bat. And I kind of did that as a student in high school with my post game interviews, which we'll talk about here in a bit. I literally asked one question and then that was the content, right? So, but again, good little tool to have in your tool case. The big one in storytelling, and to be honest, in our world, is ethics and integrity. And we look at things like AI. Taylor shared a lot in our community about Sora. That looks terrifying because I'm a video editor, and I'm like, that is terrible. Because and like especially as a video editor, like I'm really keen on how things were done, and so I'm like, was that AI? And I'm like, when I am close to not being able to tell the difference, I'm like, that's scary good. So, but beyond that, um, every story is going to shape your school's reputation and relationships. I, even as a broadcaster, knew that what I said, regardless of how I intended it to be, uh, I lost my ability to have like personal opinions that didn't affect the school, right? I am the voice for my school, and it is what other people from other schools are going to, listen to and watch. And it's what people from my own school are going to listen to and watch. When I would go down to the grocery store and they'd be like, hey, loved what you said about this. It's like, okay, people are actually listening and like paying attention to what I'm saying. The same as goes for videos you create, graphics you post, photos and captions and stuff that you tell the stories of. Like, it's gonna shape the reputation and the relationship of your school, right? And so we want to. The saying is, with great power comes great responsibility. And it's very true when it comes to being a person telling a story. It's your job, right? So at the bottom is the SPJ's Code of Ethics. This is, it's a group of journalists. It's one of the largest groups, and they came together a little over a decade ago to come up with their updated Code of Ethics, right? And so these are just the headers, and it goes into a lot more detail. But the ethics are seek truth and report it, minimize harm, act independently, and be accountable and transparent. What does that mean, right? So we want to seek the truth and report it. So what I don't like is when I know a story and I see someone say something that is not true about that story. For an example, if I was taking a photo of a player and it was a different player than the name that I put in the caption, that drives me up the wall. And it's a simple little mistake, but now you might have people from other schools saying, "Oh no, it was actually this kid who did that thing," which would not be true. Or you have your local people start to lose trust and faith in you because you were not able to, tell the story accurately, right? So that's a big one. The minimize harm, act independently. Those are like cover your sources, or like, don't tell people your sources and protect your source and all that other stuff. That's journalism at large. If we're having to protect our sources in the high school digital media class, there's something massive going on at the school, and I am not in a position to advise you on what to do. But be accountable for the posts that you put out. If you're going to share the story, you know, take responsibility for it. Be proud in it. Be proud of what you're sharing. And again, this goes maybe a little too deep on it, but it does matter. Like these are the things that a lot of people think about when they see schools posting, like, hey, let's make sure we're staying on brand and we're keeping our message clear, and we're highlighting things positively and we're not dragging other people down. That's why a lot of schools have like the barstool accounts now, which are actually more trouble than good, because it's the students, but they're using the school's name and they're just posting whatever they want, right? And so you want your own school's brand to post nice things and to promote and highlight what goes on at your school, and it's really not that hard. But again, the fourth bullet point says it all. Tell stories that uplift, inform, and inspire. And if you do those three things, you have nothing to worry about, right? If you're always doing the right thing, you have nothing to worry about. So some of the real world impact for your students, just if this hasn't come across by now, right? Um, Storytelling and your students learning how to tell stories is going to help build confidence in them, right? Um, Students who are able to take in a bunch of information and present it to somebody where they understand it, are interested in it, um, and can draw a conclusion from it is super powerful. Empathy and leadership. I mean, uh, you've got to take some initiative to go out and get the information for your story, and so that's going to take some personal leadership from yourself to go out there and say, hey, we're going to do this the right way. We're going to ask the right questions, and we're going to go forward and report on the story. I mean, I always I love promoting. Hey, this is also yet another thing that a student can put into a portfolio. When I was in college and they asked, "Hey, have you ever done an interview with somebody else?" I was like, yes, I have. I have asked them. I have come up with questions. I've sat across from them at a table. I've had cameras rolling, and I've recorded an interview and I've asked questions. That is something that I have already done, and I was ready for college and career readiness. Like I was prepared. And then again, we're we're elevating the school's brand and community connection. We There are some times where a community can feel like they don't know what's going on, and um, I think that the solution to that is for the school to put some things out on social media. We did a big presentation on that, at, let's see, was NCE, with the CTE teachers in Kearney, at the end of spring, beginning of summer. Me and Danielle presented on that, and that was one of the things I said. The schools need to be proactive in sharing their message, and it's not that hard because students can do it, and students are equipped to do it. Um, so that's just something about the real world impact of letting your students tell a story. And then finally, one of the last things is just matching your story to your medium, right? We have so many options to create different content. We could make it a video, we can make it a photo, we can make it a graphic that you make in Canva. That's got maybe a list of instructions. What do you type in for your captions for your post? What's not listed on here is what do you do with audio? Do you have a school podcast? Could that be a medium where you tell stories? And so um, I always think video, when it can't just be expressed in words or singular image, always go video. Um, there's no problem in doing a video. I mean, interviews need to do video, sports, different events. Videos are amazing. Photos are great. If you have an athlete that breaks, a record, it'd be fantastic to have, a lot of them have like a little sign that somebody made for them that says, "Hey, I broke, 1,000 career points" or something like that. That might be a crazy number, but you hand them you take a photo of them holding their sign with their family around them. That's a great way to tell that story. Graphics, it's big when you have an event and you're like, "Oh, hey, by the way, if you're coming to the play tonight, here's where parking's going to happen." If that's a thing, you can make that a graphic. And then just adding extra context in those captions and posts is extremely important. Um, this is an example of how I have covered sports before, and all of the formats that I use to amplify the story. Right, so um, I was talking to one of my examples was, "Hey, here was the 3-pointer to force overtime." Well, it was actually drawn from this game. And so one of the things I was challenged on when I was interning with Strive was to do post game interviews. It's not something that at the time a lot of people were doing unless they actually worked for a media company, but not a lot of students were just freelancing out there asking questions. And so I was sitting in the office, and Taylor was there, and I think Eric was there, and like, "Well, why don't you just pull out your camera and record?" I didn't have a microphone or anything. Like the audio, I mean, we're in a hallway. Like the audio is really echoey, and obviously this was during COVID, so I had to be in my mask, and so it wasn't perfect, but a lot of people saw that video. And for those that didn't get to watch the game, they got to hear from probably arguably our best player on the team that year, about the fact that he had 29 points. It was a triple overtime basketball game. So there was it was a close game. There was a lot of things going on. And I took out my phone and I said, "Hey, can I snag you for a couple quick questions real quick?" And I mean, overnight had over 1,000 views by the time I woke up in the morning, which blew me away because most things I did, only got 10 or 100 views at the most. And so I was like, this is really cool. A couple things for some photos highlighting emotion. This is from the Crossroads Conference, so basketball tournament and volleyball. And as you can see, the champions for volleyball really fired up. The graphic also does a great job saying, "Hey, here are the scores by set as well," so that you can see whether it was a close game or not, a close matchup. And it was fairly close. Anytime volleyball goes to a fifth set, especially a fifth set that ends 15-12, it's a very close volleyball game. And the basketball game was 59-50. And so you highlight a couple players. Those are better suited as graphics and photos than they would have been videos. They would still work, but pick and choose what your medium is. So, with all this, you might be sitting there thinking, "Well, this is awesome. I would love to do this in my class, but I don't think I can." We need to stop that mindset. We need to develop some systems, and we can help, right? Um, as I explained everything, I hope what was also, the point brought across was I have done all of these things. I've built systems. I've done it. So we want to help you. We have done it. I shouldn't just say me. Like Taylor's done this, right? We have both done all of this. And so this is what we are calling the QMP framework. This is quarterly media plan that We are offering to teachers. We want to help you set up a plan for this second quarter as it's just getting started. It's not too late. We want to help you pick a theme for the quarter, set some goals, develop those student roles, create some cadence. Skip the slide accidentally. We want to help you choose metrics and milestones, and we want to help you. We want to review and improve. We want to take you through this process, especially if you're a teacher that's already working with us for our curriculum. We really want you to get this media plan in place because uh, Taylor, you just hosted a workshop last week, and I mean, what was some of the feedback you got from the live event as you were taking teachers through it?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway was we had some teacher in Michigan join us, Missouri, and then a couple in Nebraska. And Scott from Michigan was like, the chat was blowing up just with those four, and he said, "I found my people," and that was really cool. And he went on to say he hadn't been this excited about going to school on Monday to share this with his students. So that was the big part is we were workshopping this with each other, which gave us all some energy and excitement. But then second part of it is to go take it to your students and say, "Hey, what do you guys think of this?" And so uh, we are really excited about this framework to help you, and then plug in the resources because we have so many resources that you can get inside of DME and BE that we offer. And I think we failed to recognize that there needs to be a plan put in place in order to be able to plug in all those resources. And so, kind of understand a lot of media teachers just get handed stuff and just to figure it out. And we give you guys, a simple plan that can make your program run like a real class. Like I always use the math teacher analogy. As a math teacher, you're handed a specific curriculum that the administration knows the expectation for what the students are going to learn. At the end of the year, they should be proficient in X, Y, or Z. Teacher knows it, admin knows it, student knows it, parent knows it. Media program, here you go. Here's your camera, go figure it out. We want to break that down into little steps and that you can repeat those throughout the year. Trey's going to call it seasonal media plan. So he's going to treat his fall sports, winter, and spring, and have three different plans that he'll go through. And then hopefully this allows you to get some time back because everyone's on the same page. We want to help save you time. Students can step up as leaders, and and the end result, the transformation is your school's telling better stories, whether that be your broadcast or through. So to tie it back to this webinar, you're going to make your stories more impactful because you've got a certain framework in place. So we're pumped about it. Don, you're listening here. Would love to go through this with you. Hoosier's your guy. He'll take you through it. We can get it done in about 30, 45 minutes, and would love just to get feedback. And we're passionate about it. We do it as a company on our own. We've been doing this for several years, and we finally figured out how to present this to schools, and we think it's going to stick. So we're going all in.
Yeah, and one last thing to tag onto that is, when you have the goal set and you know that this is what you're working towards, it can allow you to and this is something that has happened to me before. It allows you to block out distractions, right? Man, it would be cool to try this, but that's not what we're working towards right now. And so we're, recognizing that, hey, we're in this to, not burn out and be overly busy. Um, Man, it'd be fantastic if we could make a documentary, but you realize how much time that's going to take, and we don't, maybe as a class, don't have the skills to do it. And so we can help eliminate some of that frustration of starting something and then realizing, oh wait, we're not actually able to do that. So next steps, actionable stuff. What should we do next? First off, I actually kind of put it at the bottom, but uh, schedule your Q&P planning session with me, especially if you're a customer. I'm going to send out a calendar invite. Be looking for it. You can schedule the 30 to 45 minutes with me, and we will go through it and we will get a plan set up. I want to work with you guys on this. I was a little jealous that I wasn't able to hop on Saturday with Taylor when they were workshopping it with a few of the teachers. I had some other stuff, but I was like, man, I am missing the QMP. I was so upset. But now I'm like, I get to do it with everyone else. So really excited to set up those meetings with you. Um, Now the next thing to do is in regards to storytelling, you start small. Um, Improvement is improvement, regardless of how big or how small it is. Um, find one story maybe this month that you can highlight on your social media channels. You know, again, I don't always like going directly to sports as an example, but they are the easiest and most accessible a lot of times. So you might have to go to, you know, a volleyball game or a football game and highlight a student. Um, let's say maybe you have a foreign. I'm full of ideas. Like I love brainstorming because I just it starts flowing. Uh, let's say you got a foreign exchange student uh, on your football team. Maybe football is a new sport to them. Could you do an interview? Could you do a player profile on that kid? Because not everyone thinks to ask them those questions when they are talking to them, and most people don't even get to talk to a lot of the kids a lot of times. So, could you do some things like that and just tell personal stories? Because people will care and they'll resonate with people. And then yeah, just start building storytelling. I mean, even if you start, each Monday, like one of the things that we do, and they're more of like highlights as a team, but we're like, what's a personal professional highlight as we gather as a team on Monday? And you could even incorporate that in your classroom. Like, hey, tell me one quick story in 2 to 3 minutes about something that happened last week. Just start building that muscle in your students to always be looking for the story and always wanting to tell stories. Because as humans, we're natural storytellers. We love to tell stories. I mean, this is an hour-long story that I've been telling as we've been doing this webinar. It had a beginning, and we're now getting to the end, right? Um, we had the climax of the story with what to do next, right? And so, again, once you start to think about that framework, you always see it everywhere, and you realize that we are made to tell stories to each other and to interact as human beings, whether that's using social media or word of mouth, face to face. So. And again, as we've done for all of the webinars up till now, this is why we do this at Striv Education. It's the opportunities that these kids get. I think the biggest thing is all of those kids are storytellers. They're telling a story in some shape or form. Even if you're the camera person for a broadcast, you are helping share the story of the game for people to watch. If you're commentating, you're telling the story. If you're doing a cool video and you're setting up some lighting, you're taking photos, you're making a graphic, you're telling a story. Your students are storytellers, so let's empower them. Um, let's have a great October. And again, reach out to me for QMP one-on-one working sessions. I would love to go through it, plan them with you, uh, and help your program succeed while saving you time as a teacher. A blank slide at the end. Taylor, last thoughts?
Thanks, Hoosh. We'll
Awesome.
see you guys soon.